had to make a pick as to, whether the money should go in a multi-cap fund, a large cap fund, a thematic or a mid-cap, which one would you bet on right now?
Given the valuations currently, I would be looking at large cap tilted funds, which means that it could be large cap, completely large cap funds, or a flexi cap fund, or large and mid cap category, or even multi cap, which also has a reasonable amount of large caps. I would avoid taking lump sum investments into mid cap or a pure small cap strategy at this point of time.
Okay, so large cap is the bet coming in as far as the mutual fund is concerned from the fantastic manager today. But the next question is, what kind of Nifty returns we should expect in the coming Samvat? And I ask you that because we have seen 2 great years of returns. I think above average 19-20%.
That's true.
Calls for a bit of a moderation, doesn't it?
Clearly, I think next Samvat is going to be a year where markets could consolidate, at least in the first half.
Okay.
So to that extent, one should clearly moderate their expectations. And we have seen fantastic last 4 years. I don't think that can be repeated. If it happens, it's a bonus. But otherwise, we should be okay for a more moderate set of numbers in this Samvat.
Yeah, recency bias calls for a better and even a better kind of return, but no, it cannot be repeated at least. The next one that I wanted to ask will come up for you on the screen, and that one, of course, is the question, which is going to be the best asset class for Samvat 2081? I know you'll have your bias towards Indian equities, but take a look at gold. What, 33% up this year already? Dead, of course, at that cusp of the interest rate cycle churning, and global equities, whether it's China or US, both look quite healthy. If you had to take a pick, what would you bet on?
I would still tilt towards Indian equities, but yes, I think gold is likely to continue its positive run. So to that extent, maybe some bit of investments into gold and silver and some into Indian equities. That could be our suggestion.
Okay, so these are 2 that you need to bet on when it comes to the portfolio allocation. But what's the biggest risk for the markets that you see in India? Because of course valuations are punchy. Globally we have seen, wars going on and it's not subsiding, plus elections, etc., which are lined up. Earnings we discussed in detail that haven't been impressive. And of course a bit of a macroeconomic tilt here in the sense that inflation hasn't really moderated to the extent we wanted. What do you think is something that you're watching out for the most closely right now?
More than global factors and macroeconomic factors, I would say earnings and valuations at this point of time would be very critical for the markets to continue giving healthy returns. As we have seen earnings moderating over the last couple of quarters, I think all eyes will be on H2. And especially given that it's also a heavier half compared to first half, we should be able to see slightly better numbers there. And if that were to happen, I think the confidence can come back into the markets.
Okay, let's see confidence comes back or not, and confidence comes back into which of these sectors then? You did talk about IT sector leading growth, you talked about financials seeing a decent valuation comfort, and energy transition is of course a big theme. If you had to pick one sector for Samvat 2081, which would that be?
I would probably pick IT services at this point of time.
Okay, IT services has done well in the last 2-3 months, but it's expected to continue. Samvat, do you want to take over and ask Harsha about some of his other recommendations as well?
Well, there's one sector that I would want to talk to you about, and that's the PSU. If you look at the last Samvat, the first half PSU stocks, in fact, defense stocks, were the talk of the town. But of late, we have seen a steep correction when it comes. Some of them have dropped nearly 50% from the peaks. So after this drop, does the defense space or does the PSU space look interesting?
First of all, I don't think we should look at it only based on ownership, because we don't look at all private companies as one basket and all PSUs as one basket. Yes, at a point of time when the valuations were very, very low, probably everyone believed that PSUs would outperform, and that has already played out. Now, given the fact that the businesses, underlying businesses are different, the valuations could be different in some of those segments as well. I think we will have to look at more from a bottom-up perspective. There will be a set of public sector companies which will still show reasonable earnings growth, and also valuations are on their side. So some of them will still continue to outperform. But as a basket, I think we have already seen one level of outperformance from very low valuations to the valuations that we are in currently. So to that extent, we may not see a uniform rally across PSU segment. And depending on the businesses and the valuations, I think we'll have to look at them.
And lastly, sir, before we let you go, we need to roll this wheel of fortune here.
Sure.
So will this roll this, whichever question comes you have to answer.
Sure.
Well,
that's the question everyone wants to know.
If you can't give a stock, at least a sector.
I would say that rather than looking for a multi-bagger, I think now it's the time to look for long-term investments, long-term compounding investments. I'm sure that most mutual funds are doing a good job in terms of creating that long-term wealth for investors, and investors should continue to bet on mutual funds and look for long-term wealth creation with asset allocation in mind rather than looking for multi-baggers. I think the easy multi-bagger era is behind us. I think it's going to be more challenging as we are at elevated valuations and also earnings are slowing down. So I would say moderate your expectations and look for long-term returns rather than multi-bagger ideas.
So no multi-bagger idea, at least for the next Samvat. Let's see how it goes. For the next question here. And okay, your biggest regret?
No, absolutely no regrets. I think
Wow.
if you miss some investments which have given fantastic returns in the past, our job is to find for new avenues, and hopefully we'll be able to find some of them this Samvat as well.
And the last one here. Well,
You know, I have the question. Forget about that. Learning from last year is what I want to ask him. Which is your biggest learning from this year?
I think clearly valuations have moved up quite a bit. So to that extent, expecting uniform rally across sectors may be a thing of the past. It has to be more stock specific, and we have to focus more on earnings. Last year probably the earnings disappointments were much lesser, and so to that extent it was a uniform kind of a marketplace. This year I think there will be a differentiation in terms of how stocks do. Based on earnings and valuations. I think that will be something that we need to keep in mind,
Okay.
not just go by what has happened in the past.